Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. We're continuing our run through Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I almost said Next Generation for some reason. We're up to the episode called Accession. Not Ascension, as many people have written in the comments. It is Accession. That's a very nitpicky thing for me to say, but it's a weird word. We talked about that last time. It is the 17th episode of the 4th season, aired on February 24th, 1996. It was written by Jane Espenson, directed by Les Landau. In this episode, a 300-year-old Bajoran ship comes through the wormhole, and its passenger claims that he is the emissary of the prophets. We're joined by Clay, as always. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. This is very much a classic style. Everything returns to the status quo at the end, but I really hope we get to see more of Kira's awful Beetlejuice mom sculptures going forward.
Yeah, right. In a world with no currency, I'm sure someone would be willing to pay for those things that she had produced. Their art is in the eye of the beholder. There is no objective quality to sculptures. We're talking about Accession, which is a return to the Bajoran faith and the Bajoran people, and a return of Keiko O'Brien to the wormhole. Or not the wormhole, to the DS9. Anyway, we're going to take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back, and we're going to break down Accession.
I wanted to talk to you before you left for Bajor.
Of course.
I was surprised by your speech. I had no idea you were going to advocate change on such a massive scale.
It's what the prophets want for Bajor. It's why they sent me.
Are you sure of that?
Absolutely.
The emissary knows that what he's proposing will be difficult for some people to accept. He doesn't expect things to change overnight.
So, you're not going to ask First Minister Shakar to step down and go back to farming?
No, of course not. But frankly, by the next election, I doubt very many people will be left on Bajor who would elect a farmer to political office.
We hope that eventually the people will support enforcement of the Dajaras by legal sanction.
So if someone defies their caste?
Society will have appropriate remedies at its disposal, such as deportation.
You realize that caste-based discrimination goes against the Federation Charter. If Bajor returns to the Dajara system, I have no doubt that its petition to join the Federation will be rejected.
Kai Wynn and I have already discussed it. We're willing to make that sacrifice in order to follow the will of the prophets.
I had a feeling Wynn would see it that way.
All right, Clay. So, I don't know. This is one of those episodes. I don't know if this episode is very good, but there's a lot going on that I think is either interesting if not good, or it's interesting if it is good. It's one of those things. It has a lot of concepts and stuff under the hood that I find fascinating, even if I'm not sure that in the end I'm thinking that that's an episode I walk away from going like, that was a good use of my time to watch that. So this episode posits two very interesting things, at least. It says to me on one level that the best people to lead a religious movement are the either agnostic or atheistic non-believers. They are the best leaders of a religion. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that posits is that Chief O'Brien is a closeted homosexual who hates his family on some level.
Well, I think it posits a third thing in that apparently you can be 7 months pregnant even though you've been off the station for a year.
Yeah, well, she came back, I guess, is the...
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's true. He does say that the last time that she visited. And that, I will say, is more of an explanation than the one pointed out by Dave from Clone Wars, given Padme Amidala's pregnancy.
Yes.
And how that's not possible to have happened.
Yep. Yeah, it's pregnancy is a wishy-washy thing that seems to be impacted more by the state of the actors and actresses on the series than the actual logic of what's going into it. But
just like in real life.
I think that the emissary aspect is the meatier one. So do we want to just talk about O'Brien's subplot first?
Sure.
Would you, if you want to start with what you thought about the episode, and then maybe we'll just segue into the O'Brien storyline where Keiko and Molly have returned to the station after a year away, and Keiko is pregnant, and Chief O'Brien is reacting appropriately.
Overall, I thought it was fine. The only thing that really saved it for me, you know how much I don't like the Bajoran religion shit. The only thing that saved it for me was the idea that this emissary guy was basically like a fundamentalist. That I found really interesting, but I didn't really think they did anything with it. So I was a little bit bummed at that. And the O'Brien stuff, it was fine. I don't know. Yeah, this was just kind of like a really middling episode for me overall, I think.
Yeah. The O'Brien stuff is, what's most interesting to me about it is the fact that throughout the series, they've never really, I don't believe that Chief O'Brien likes his family. Like, I say that sort of joking, but it's sort of true in the sense that I've mentioned before, he always has the attitude towards Keiko where his reaction to her is always as if she's like this hardline drill sergeant who doesn't let him do anything. And he's always allowed to do whatever he does, but he's always kind of moping about due to his family obligations. And it's more like he's just kind of a whiny little bitch sometimes. Like, he doesn't tell her that he wants to do things. He just kind of mopes about it. And I find that odd, and I find it like a strange character beat. Like, it just continues the fact that I don't think they know how to write this family unit very effectively. And they come across so strained and not realistic that I draw my own conclusions about O'Brien's happiness. Even though I think the script thinks that O'Brien is perfectly happy in his family, I think the series thinks he's perfectly happy. Everything that comes out of the actors implies otherwise to me.
Yeah, he the reaction to his family is it's like they're trying to write a character from like The Honeymooners or something, where he always refers to his wife as the old ball and chain. But it's not that cynical. And they basically O'Brien is just a terrible communicator.
Yes.
Because his wife seems totally cool. But he is always acting as though there is a certain thing that he has to do, being the husband and father of this family, and gets annoyed when he can't do other stuff. But as you see in this episode, Keiko is totally fine with being like, dude, just go do whatever you want. Just go do your thing. But yeah, for some reason, O'Brien's approach to it is very much like, the fact that they're here means I can't do what I want to do, even though he very clearly could and eventually does.
Yeah. I mean,
like the beginning, they do this whole thing where it's him and Bashir like cleaning up the apartment. I don't know what the fuck he's been doing in there.
Yeah, apparently Bashir's been staying over there or something. That's my implication about what's going on. But yeah, they're cleaning up. He's turned his apartment into like I don't know what the hell they're doing. I guess they're designing
it looks like a storage unit.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're lamenting his last day as like basically a bachelor because his family's been gone for a year or whatever. And it's like, the problem I think with this story, and you know, maybe this is just coming from someone who I would like to think appreciates my family. There's no turn at the end where he's like, you know what? You're right. I'm being really childish about this. My family's pretty great. Maybe I should just, suck it up. And then, Keiko's like, yeah, we are pretty great. Now go do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
The end is just him moping around until Keiko it's
Keiko
a really
plays
weird
matchmaker. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really weird ending if you think about it, because like he's on one level, yeah, he's looking forward to spending time with Keiko, but Keiko's really busy.
Yep.
And they kind of play that as though Keiko's just sort of like ignoring him. But then eventually she's basically kind of doing the same thing he's doing, because without saying it, she's like, I need to find a way to get him out of my hair.
Yeah.
It's a really kind of strange ending.
I find it strange just in the fact that, she sets them up. She plays matchmaker, and she's like, go hang out with Julian Bashir. He runs off like a teenager to the door, right? And he looks back and he kind of winks at her. They don't have that. That's the scene where you're saying what you're saying, like shouldn't that scene be written where O'Brien realizes how great Keiko is to him and he
Yes.
kisses her and decides to hang out with her or something? But instead they play it as...
Well, she doesn't want him to hang out, though. That's the whole thing. She wants him to get the fuck out of the apartment.
Yeah. It's just very weird. So what's the schism there? Like, why is this not being portrayed properly? Because they've shown that they can write father and son relationships, and so it's not like the daughter being O'Brien's child being a daughter is going to change anything really drastic there. She's a little bit younger, so you can't write for her in the way that you can write for Jake. But I don't understand I think you might be onto something with them trying to write it as if they're the honeymooners, and it's just not coming across that way.
Yeah.
It comes across as a really strained relationship that they don't really like each other. I think that the O'Brien and Keiko don't have any chemistry with each other either, which is a problem. And it just... All those scenes just seem very odd to me, and the way that they're writing, the way that he approaches the Bashir thing, and it seems like the writers really enjoy, maybe from the writer's perspective, what's coming across is the fact that they enjoy writing Bashir and O'Brien as a couple more than they enjoy writing the O'Briens as a couple, and it seems to come across that way in the script.
Yeah, and they write both of them as though they don't really like each other that much. Like it's. Because, like, even when they get back, O'Brien is, like, trying to be affectionate with Keiko, and Keiko's like, meh, no.
Yeah.
Or, it's like, even in that point, it's like, it's not just a one-sided thing where it's not like Keiko really wants to spend time with O'Brien, and O'Brien just is, has got one foot out the door.
Yep.
She doesn't want to spend time with him either. And it's a very... I don't know. I mean, you could argue that it's a fairly realistic relationship. I mean, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who have relationships like that where their communication skills are just very bad.
I mean, on a personal level, I think yes, I'd agree with that. But I don't think the show realizes that O'Brien's communication skills are bad because they never bring it up really.
Right.
Like Keiko never throws that back at him to make it seem like the show is aware that this is the problem. But he is very mopey about everything. I think that on a personal level, I kind of related to O'Brien's conundrum here, although I thought that they just didn't do a good job of explaining the positives to it. Like, I totally understand him being sort of blindsided by the pregnancy and being like, oh, I thought I had more time, and now this whole thing is going to change.
Oh, yeah? Would you like to elaborate on that on a more personal level?
Every time Amy has told me that she is pregnant, it has been like a punch to the gut. Sort of like you're happy, but at the same time you're like, oh no, it finally happened.
Yeah, like in The Simpsons, you just lose the rest of your hair.
Right. That's right. Every
time a new baby's announced, you lose a different quadrant of your hair.
It's always good, but it becomes real in a way there when it's not real when you're trying. Like the trying is always very abstract of an idea of what's going to happen, and then when it finally happens, you're like, oh no, this is actually here. It's still 9 months away, but O'Brien didn't even get that realization. So I understand his problem there. I don't really understand the fact that Molly is older and goes to bed. Kind of bugs me that it seems like O'Brien thinks he has no free time when he clearly has a ton of free time. He's not doing anything. Yeah. But I mean, I thought it was an interesting concept as being someone with the kids who has kids. It felt good. It's just they didn't really do anything interesting with it. It's not. I understood the initial urge to write the story, but after that was done, I was like, well, that was a kind of a terrible take on his storyline.
So is like Bashir the stand-in for a Star Trek podcast, basically, in this situation?
That's right. Me and you were going to start another podcast about whatever the fuck they're cosplaying as on their holosuite adventures. I think they're like barbarian invaders or something.
Yeah, they've got two. They've got the Battle of Britain and the I'm not totally sure what the more medieval looking one is. But,
yeah, they're attacking kings and stuff in it. Yeah, that would be pretty much it. It's my escape. And
it is funny that you mentioned. I mean, I don't think that I know you were joking about the closet homoeroticism thing, but both of their costumes, they're like couples costumes, screams like something you would see in some of that stock footage from like Studio 54.
Yeah.
Where it's just like a bunch of people dancing and then two guys dressed as World War II bomber guys.
I am I am joking about their the closeted homosexual stuff, but it's a. Did you not feel? Didn't you feel this like the scene where they are in the bar having a drink after Keiko has come back and they're like lamenting their broken relationship at that point? That was written like a breakup relationship. Like it was written as though they had broken up, and I don't know. The script didn't do a good enough job of playing it off as if it was aware of what it was doing there and like sort of making it obvious that it was kind of being like a lighthearted sort of poking fun about like which relationship would O'Brien rather be in. It came across as just kind of just sort of an odd relationship between the two of them. Like I think you have to decide which way you want to go there, and the episode didn't decide which way it wanted to go, so it came out in the middle, and it wasn't very satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think about it that much. I think they're just trying to play the. I mean, O'Brien's basically like they're playing him like he's a teenager essentially, and that like. You know, they're playing him the same. They're playing it the same way as though he is like going off to college and can't hang out with his friends in the summer anymore. And so he's got to say goodbye to his friend at the end of the summer. And it's like, but I mean, you're gonna come back and hang out next summer, right? And he's like, yeah. But
I suppose that's true. Except I would argue that the station is a college dorm. Like there's nothing stopping you from doing anything that you want to do with the other people because everything is just downstairs.
I mean,
you're just making an example.
Right making an example. He's not literally going to college, Wes. He's already he's already in Starfleet.
He graduated, yeah. Didn't go to the academy though.
That's true.
So he missed out on a great youthful opportunity.
But you never know. Maybe 2 months goes by and he wants to hang out with Bashir, and Bashir's off at tennis camp. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think there's much more else to that kind of stuff. I really find it sort of bizarre that they write these guys this way. O'Brien's interactions with Molly O'Brien are very funny to me. It's like he acts like a man he acts as if Molly's not his child to her. It's this sort of awkward.
Yeah, he kind of does.
Awkward, stilted, like he kind of has a sneaking suspicion that she's not his kid kind of attitude towards her. And the scene where... You know, he's like, "Hey, Molly, can I play with you?" And she said, "No, like I'm doing it." I don't know why he finds that so devastating. Like it's just a kid, like it's a kid's storyline. I don't know. It rang true, and I know it's supposed to be hammering home the point that Julian lets me play with him whenever I want, but it didn't feel like a very loving. He hasn't seen his kid in a year, basically, and this is the kind of attitude he has towards her. It's strange.
Well, I mean, again, it's equal both ways. The kid's not super excited to see him.
Yeah,
he's not super excited. Their interaction is like he's her stepfather.
Yes, yeah,
or like Keiko's new boyfriend or something, where it's like he's trying to hang out with the kid. Yeah, he's trying to hang out with the kid, but the kid doesn't really know him. She keeps calling him Miles. That kind of thing. And then he's like, well, I got to try to do the dad thing, but it's killing me inside, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was it's a storyline that's more interesting than I think it is good. It doesn't really amount to anything except for it reintroduces the fact that Keiko and Molly are back on the station, which honestly, did you miss them?
Are they going to be around for a while?
What's that?
Are they going to be around for a while now? Do they show up more?
Yeah, they're back.
Okay.
I forget why they were removed from
Sonny Crockett has moved the picture of his son off the wall back onto the desk.
I think they got rid of them just to have a chance to flesh out the O'Brien and Bashir relationship on the writers' level. So I guess they went as far as they could with that, and they're going to bring them back. So let's talk about the Emissary plot line here, which is the meat and potatoes aspect of it. What'd you think about this? You don't really like the Bajoran religion stuff. I thought this was maybe the best Bajoran religion storyline that the show has done so far, because to me, this is the only episode that has really brought attention to the fact that Sisko in the show as the emissary should have more responsibilities than occasionally every once in a while on an episode saying, "I am the emissary." And here you get a look at the fact that it actually impacts his day-to-day work by people always want to come and talk to him. And I don't know, I thought that was interesting. I thought that what they did in this episode was something that they should have been doing the entire show to this point. Like his sort of coming to terms with this role and how it impacts him, and maybe getting annoyed by the fact that he has to do this. I feel like there's so much conflict here that would have made the Bajoran religion interesting, and it's shoved into this episode kind of as a one-off, and it's a little bit unsatisfying.
No, I would 100% agree with you. I think the stuff with Sisko was the most interesting that Emissary stuff has ever been, and the introduction of a fundamentalist emissary to take his place, I thought was super interesting.
Who has good intentions too. He's not Kai Wynn or Vedic Wynn or anything like that.
Right. He has good intentions, but everybody kind of recognizes why
it won't work.
Yeah. And why they've moved past that. And it's, I wish it was something that they explored a little, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's nowhere to go with that. But I feel like it would add an interesting wrinkle into the state of affairs between cultures and stuff. If you now had the Bajorans going backwards basically while you were trying to deal with the Cardassians and the Klingons and all this kind of shit.
Yeah, I mean, while Starfleet is trying to move them forward into joining the Federation, they are hitting a cultural divide that's moving them backwards as a recovery.
I am shocked. Well, not shocked. I guess it makes sense because you need to have a plot that involves your main characters. But I think it could have been equally as interesting, if not more interesting, if Kira had decided that, she's not going to do that. I mean, she has that speech about, faith and all that stuff with Odo, where Odo is just like taking the Bill Maher approach to the Bajoran religion.
To faith, yeah. It seems to me, Major, your religion is full of shit, is basically what he says to her.
But I don't know. I think you could have had an interesting episode about Kira decided, actively choosing that that's not what she wants, and she chooses to move forward and all that kind of stuff. And I wish they had done more with it. And first of all, I didn't realize emissary was a position you could just give up. And second of all, I don't know. Everybody was just fine when Sisko and the other guy left together, and then Sisko comes back alone, and he's like,
the prophets chose me.
The prophets, the prophets, they took him, and they sent him back to his home timeline.
Yeah.
And everyth's fine. It's definitely no more complicated or sinister than that. I'm surprised they didn't just, part of the returning him to his own timeline or whatever didn't involve removing him from the current timeline, just to kind of clean that up a little bit, where it's like, well, what if we just erase any of this from happening, and we just don't have to deal with that.
Well, they have the scene at the end where they've changed the timeline, yet Kira is aware that the timeline has changed, and she's aware of the difference. Because he finished the poem when he went back in this timeline. Right. Well, I was surprised that they didn't just wipe him from the present, so you wouldn't have to deal with those questions. So it's just like instead of that sort of large logic leap of Sisko coming back alone and people just being like, oh yeah, of course, yeah, the prophets just sent him back in time. No sweat. Just being like, yeah, the prophets just wiped him away. Sisko remembers it, but everybody else doesn't, that kind of thing. There's never been a doubt that Sisko is the emissary. Right. In which case I was thinking, man, he has a lot of alternate timelines that he knows stuff about in his head at this point. Yeah, that's true. He is the keystone of a lot of timeline history in Star Trek, I think, Sisko is. Next time they do like a crossover, if they ever do the big multi-captain crossover movie, where it's like, old man Picard and older Janeway and older Sisko, and it involves some sort of time travel. I really hope they're talking about it, and then Sisko's just like, oh yeah, no, I know that timeline. Yeah, right. I saw that once. This is one of those storylines that I wish they had tied in more, and I think that it's one of those things that it actually doesn't work all that well as a single episode's idea. It's one of those... It's a plot that probably should have spanned a season. If this was a modern TV show, this would have been this guy coming to power and making these changes would have been something that was drawn out a little bit more. Yep. And I think when it does it on an episode basis, it's one of those things that I could buy this happening to the Bajoran religion if you stretched it out and you fleshed it out a little bit. But what it does when it's in one episode is it makes the Bajoran religions look extremely fickle and stupid. Like they have no grounding to their beliefs. Like anything that happens, it seems like the whole planet is like, well, we all fucking changed our minds. Like we're just going to do this now. Right. And because of the fact that the Bajoran religion is so vague that they're allowed to do this, but it comes across as very, like, does the Federation really want these people? They seem so blown in whatever direction the winds are going that I don't know how stable of a society they are. And
also, that guy fucking killed a guy.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the change I'm talking about. He's a normal guy in one scene, and then this guy appears and he's like, hey, we should go back to the Jigata or whatever those things are called. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to kill this guy because I don't like his Jigata or whatever that thing is. And, he doesn't come across as a psychopath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rational. Like, that guy clearly remembers what it was like the last time they did it. And he's like, yeah, I know how to do this.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, like, that was the interesting part of the episode to me, where it's like you've got, if they had expanded on that and it was, so you've got this guy who killed this other guy because the other guy didn't want to go back to the way things were. And, his family cast was that he was like an undertaker or something. So he was deemed unclean. And then the other dude was like, yeah, that's why I killed him, because he didn't go back to that and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got a murder on your hands, and then you've got Kira in the middle of that trying to rationalize, like, shit, I mean, on the one hand, I do want to be a part of my civilization and my culture and follow this line of faith that I've believed my whole life. But on the other hand, having lived my life as someone more independent and someone who is working as in a high-level position with Starfleet and the Federation and seeing how, how things can work otherwise, this dude just killed a guy. Yeah. Where do I fall in this? I mean, that I find that a lot more interesting than, let's fly into the wormhole and spend $800,000 on a shitty wormhole shot and then put some Vaseline on the lens so Bashir and Kira and Odo can speak in one-word sentences and then just be like, how about we just take this guy out of the timeline? It's fine.
I still really like the prophet sequences. I still think that they work in concept and execution. But I'm going to avoid that point. I don't really want to talk about that. But the Kira thing is interesting. It's another point where I feel like they have missed an opportunity to give Kira an episode that involves her in some way. Mm-hmm. She is again tangential to whatever the main plot is here, and similar to the Bajoran criticism I had before, she seems very willing to be blown by the wind in whatever direction that society deems that she goes, which is odd for such a strong-willed freedom fighter character.
Right. Yeah, she should not. I mean, her opinions and viewpoints should be more informed by the life that she's led when it comes to this stuff.
Yes, exactly. I think the episode, although I like the idea of that Kira episode, I feel this is too important and too vital of a chance to show Sisko's emissary role. And I think they do that well here. By the end of it, do you think Sisko has changed his perception of what his role is here? Is this episode saying anything about Sisko accepting his role, or is this him purely trying to look out for Bajor's best interests? Or are they the same thing?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, because, he seems a lot more willing to be a part of that whole thing at the end than he did at the beginning. Although not that much, because, I mean, even at the beginning, he's kind of like, yeah, no, that's cool. I got no problem doing that blessing for you, no sweat.
Well, you know what the problem is? The Bajorans who come to meet him act as if they are people who are meeting their favorite author. It's like, It's not like they're running into the Pope or anything. They're just like, hey, emissary, like, you want to sign my book for me? And he's like, all right. And they're like, hey, good, thanks. Good to see you. We'll see you later. Mm-hmm. It's not a very pious, like, kneeling and sort of like they can't believe that they are in the presence of the prophet, basically. And I think that's kind of a problem. So when Sisko, if it was more of that, you would understand Sisko having a problem with it, because he is if they were more devout towards him, you can see his conflict of like, I don't really believe this. I feel bad that I'm leading these people on in this way. And all they ask him to do is basically read a prayer, like he's a justice of a peace at a friend's wedding, and he's like, "All right, I'll see you guys later," and that's it for his responsibility. I feel they missed the point there of the conflict, and they also, if you wanted to span this into a storyline, I think the fact that Starfleet is anti him doing this is a very interesting storyline that they could have gone with.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that till you mentioned it, but yeah, when he's talking to Kira about how he just got chewed out by Starfleet because he basically failed in their eyes because what he was supposed to do there is bridge between the two people, and him resigning the emissary position means that that's not going to happen. I thought that was really interesting too. I wish that's another thing I wish they had expanded on.
Yeah. I think it just doesn't. All the ideas are there, and I wish they had been fleshed out more. I will say that I think the ending actually does a little bit of damage to it too. I like the prophet scenes generally. I like the fact that they continue to use the prophet's sense of time as a way to tie them into things. Like when the humans and the Bajorans have the problem of like, why did you send me 200 years into the future? The prophets who are aliens and have no concept of time are like, what are you talking about? Sort of like it's just kind of a weird accident that this happened, and they wanted him to meet Sisko, but they don't have any regard for the Bajoran life. And I'm always interested by that about the prophets, is that the prophets are the gods of the Bajorans, but the prophets are very dismissive and not interested in how the Bajorans and the humans live in their world, because they aren't really their gods. They're just kind of aliens that are out there. But
yeah. I was wondering, so do they basically say, excuse me, when he's like, why didn't you send me, why did you keep me for 200 years? Do they basically say, so because you weren't worthy or something? Or I couldn't quite parse out. The problem with speaking in one-word sentences is sometimes it's difficult to determine what they're trying to say.
They sent him back. My understanding is that they kept him, or they sent him into the future because they needed him to draw Sisko into the wormhole, which is not necessary except to resolve the plot that you've created by sending this guy 200 years into the future. Does that make sense? So if they say to him that we needed you to bring us the Sisko, except Sisko was already the emissary in this timeline, and sending that guy out to get him is only fixing the problem that sending him out in the first place has created. So the prophets didn't really do anything.
So is this basically the prophet's equivalent of like sending in starting the guy who's usually on the bench for a game just to like wake you up?
Maybe.
Send you a message?
Yeah, maybe. That's
or like when you're trying to ask for more money for like a part, and they're like, well, we're going to get Colin Farrell. And you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah, right. I think that's maybe the way it is. And if that's the case, Sisko's awakening at the end is much stronger than the show is implying, or that it maybe should be implying. Because I like to think that what has happened here has sort of reaffirmed Sisko's belief in what's going on. And even though he sort of says that he's a doubter of the Bajoran faith early on in the episode, saying that he's a skeptic, but even though he's been reading all the tomes and the religious writings about this, he doesn't actually believe in any of it. Mm-hmm. I think the ending is sort of implying that he's maybe not buying into it, but it's hitting him on some personal level. He's buying into the role, at least on a quote unquote spiritual level as opposed to an intellectual level.
Yeah.
But the problem with the ending in the Prophets is that it is so vague and meaningless that it's a stupid ending to me, because they give Sisko just this vague we are of Bajor, and then they send him off on his way, and there's no reason for the prophets to have been doing this. And it's not like you even going through this whole churn of stuff that you learned anything about the prophets, you learned anything about their motives, you learned anything about the situation. It was all done very arbitrarily by the prophets just to get this plot into motion, and then it doesn't even resolve very well.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with this one?
Yes, there is something we didn't mention, which actually was my favorite part of two things. First, I can't remember exactly what she said, but you reminded me of it as when you were talking about that opening scene when the couple comes in. Sisko's in there with Dax, and Sisko says something about like having a certain amount of power and not really knowing if he wants it. And then Dax is like, I'd want that.
Yeah.
Like Dax has this like weird low key, power thirst. I wish I could remember the actual line, but I didn't write it down. So I might be completely wrong. Maybe I was just reading that incorrectly. But second, my favorite part of the episode is when Bashir tells Worf that O'Brien's having another kid.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, Worf delivered, Molly and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, when are you having your child? 7 months. He's like, I will not be here.
Yep.
I will be very far away.
That's good comedy from those guys.
Yeah, it was good. It was they played it pretty well. Yeah.
Just him standing in the background, sort of shell-shocked by the news of what?
That's what it was. He goes, the O'Briens are having another baby. And he goes, now?
Yeah. It's always nice that they can link those things. Yep, that was a good comedy turn by Michael Dorn. It is he played that very, very well. I think the whole thing was played very well between all of them. It's a DS9 thing. It's just that the level of comfort between the characters feels a little bit different than it did on the other series, and right there is a good example, I think. I think that's it. Did you have anything else?
I don't think so.
No, that's pretty much it. We talked about O'Brien as a dad. We talked about the Emissary role and the Emissary storyline. It's the annual Bajoran Emissary episode. Kind of a staple of the show at this point now. But we're going to take a break. I'm going to play a audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back. We're going to break down or give our final thoughts about Accession.
Julian, how have you been?
Not bad. You?
Oh, all right.
I was heading home. Thought I'd stop in for a quick pint.
It's been a while, eh?
Seems like weeks. I see you found someone to play darts with.
Oh,
I've set a board up in our quarters so Molly and I can play.
well, Morn's, he's pretty good.
So's Molly. It's not the same.
All right, so we'll do patron thoughts first. If you guys support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them on the podcast. Accession, Holly McLaughlin. I think this is a really good episode, but I only rewatch it maybe once every couple of years because it's so painful to see the Bajorans slip so easily into caste-based discrimination. I cheer when Sisko flatly asserts that such a thing will keep them out of the Federation, and again when Sisko reaffirms his destiny as the emissary and retakes his position. Zim Nuclear Vessel says, Accession, the episode kind of glosses over what I consider to be the coolest part, that the prophets plucked Acheron out of time in order to get Sisko on track as the emissary. So that is the reading that people have here, Clay.
Okay.
Also has a nice semi-hidden message that your historical hero probably has a lot of opinions you wouldn't like. And is it possible Dukat was right in a very self-serving way when he said that the occupation had been good for Bajor? It's thought-provoking, actually.
So this is like the equivalent of if you really liked Ender's Game, and then Orson Scott Card just showed up, and you're like, yeah, I like his book, but I think he's got some problematic opinions on, a lot of other things.
Like his work, don't like his politics. Stephen Cobb says, Accession, fun to see Quark reminisce about Nog as a baby. That was one other joke. The see Brock acquire Brock acquire is a terrific joke. That's very good. Fun to see Quark reminisce about Nog as a baby. Everything goes straight into their ears. Acquire Brock acquire. Good reminder of alien points of view. I did like that one. Let's see here. Chad Wiley says, Accession, I always like this episode. As a fantasy fan more than a sci-fi fan, I like the prophets showing a personal interest in Sisko. It makes them more like gods and less like random aliens, which opens up more interesting story possibilities. The idea of settling an argument about who the chosen one really is by asking the gods directly is a pretty cool idea. Also, Worf's now might get my vote as the funniest line in all of Star Trek. Matthew Ross, Accession, the religiosity and mildly mindless following of the newest prophet of the week for the Bajorans reminds me of the life of Brian. Regardless, Sisko's realization that the appearance of the author as a test of his emissariness was a nice touch. The new sets of rules for Bajoran religion and the enlightenment of the Federation makes you wonder what is this episode trying to sell. Religion is bad, demagogues are bad, Kai Wynn, well, we know she's bad. There is no fate except what the prophets give you. The fact that the timeline is a bit messed up and no one notices was very funny, if not ridiculous. Neil Brennan, Accession, only quibble with Kira's I'm quitting scene. Oh, well, I'll talk about this in a second. After spending 4 seasons with her, I just don't buy it. So either there's a scene missing that gives better grounding to the motivation, or the Bajoran religion just isn't convincing at all. I wrote the scene where Kira says she's going to quit, and Sisko's like, if you can, I can find someone to fit your role, but I'll never replace you, as like his voice wavers. Worst scene of the season so far. That was a terrible scene. It was so.
Were you expecting like do 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 do?
I'd expect that over the top. I thought that was awful. That was so melodramatic and bad that I agree with Neil that it kind of comes out of nowhere. I think they hint at it, but Kira's motivation to quit just feels like it comes on all of a sudden. And outside of that, I just thought it was really cheesy. Just a really cheesy scene.
Yeah, I would expect Sisko to be like, resignation not accepted.
Right.
Get back to your post, Major.
You got a job to do, especially as how we've seen a bunch of episodes where him chewing out subordinates for not doing their job recently.
Yeah. Show me you can have a mild base understanding of how sculpture works, and maybe we'll talk about it.
She certainly lucked out by not being in the cast of like Stonebreakers and stuff. Like she ended up in a pretty good one.
So yeah, I know she's like. That's a pretty posh cast to be in, isn't it?
Yeah. Not like the other guy who got thrown off of the walkway.
And honestly, that could have been interesting too. I mean, if this had been a longer thing, if Kira has to go back home and deal with the, posh way that her, family or cast is living versus what she's used to, that could be kind of interesting too.
Yeah. Accession, Paul Evans. The way that the Bajorans are portrayed is very strange. There's a lot of groupthink, which would put the Bajoran religion down as more of a cult. We see this many times where as soon as there is any change in the political or religious sphere, the entire population follows the new party line. This feels more than choosing a new pope. The chosen one of the prophets has been replaced and massive cultural reforms have been implemented. There was no schism caused by this. No one kept following the ideas of Sisko after the change. No one kept the idea of sticking to the Dajara after the return of Sisko. The timeline here is deliberately left strange, so there could be room for this. This is another one of the Bajoran episodes that could have been good if it were not for the total obedience of the entire population when things change. Agreed. The Bajoran changes just happen so rapidly. Will Yates, Accession. This is a really interesting premise. Sisko coming to terms with his fate despite his desire to let it go. I don't know what was going on with Dax in the office scene where her and Sisko are discussing the ancient prophecies. Terry Farrell's performance was akin to a clown car cashing into an orphanage. You hope for the best, but then you get what's sad. It's interesting to see the heavy-handed tactics of Bajoran who hadn't been through the occupation would use in the name of religious conviction. I also think that it was strange that the way that the faux emissary and the devout priest were all smiles when describing the eventual fascism they planned to introduce. The slow-moving close-ups were used a bit too much for my liking, but I suppose it did show the individual feelings in a global situation that must have many different responses.
Yeah, those I noticed that too. They did a lot of weird push-ins and stuff that were
unusual.
They were Steven Spielberg did not direct this. Let's put it that way.
I do think it rang true that after a year, O'Brien was pissed that he wasn't getting any more ass upon the return of his wife. Lastly, I love the comedy that they can pull from Worf when he hears that Keiko is having a baby. Using Worf as comedy relief is a great way to have the jokes without becoming too obvious. Kyle Barrett, last comment. Accession. It's hard to buy into any of the character drama because Sisko being the emissary rarely comes up. It's as if he's been struggling with it for years, we haven't known about it. If he's been struggling with it for years, we haven't known about it. Everything in the episode is fine, but nothing holds any weight. And, quote, the prophets work in mysterious ways, end quote, is a bit too cheeky an explanation to get away with the time paradoxes the ending causes. It's like you said last podcast, if this is the quality of the worst episodes when the season's doing something right. It's like you said last podcast, if this is the quality of the worst episodes, then the season's doing something right. And we do get Worf's funniest moment yet. That's it. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the show. Thank you for leaving your comments. People had a lot of thoughts about Accession for one reason or another, which is funny because I find it a pretty middling episode. But as Kyle says, if this is one of the worst, then I think the season's in pretty good shape. Clay, on a scale of 1 to 5, what are you going to give this episode?
Low 3.
Low 3.
Because I feel like it's not as good as the last one, and the last one was a pretty strong 3.
Oh, interesting. The last one being the Ferengi episode.
Yes.
Bar Association. I'd say this is a maybe it's just my bias against the Ferengi episodes. I like this one a little bit better than Bar Association. I'd agree it's a 3, but I would flip them and just say this is a better 3 than the other one. I'm surprised because I would have thought that I like the ideas here, and you're usually the ideas man.
Yeah, I did like the ideas, but I don't know. I wish they had done more with them, and I thought the ending was kind of bogus.
Okay, yeah, I'll give it a 3. I think it's it had a lot of stuff going on. I think all the patrons are actually on the same page as me about all the problems with it, so maybe it's not all that unique of an opinion that I have, but it's an episode that I would have liked to have seen fleshed out earlier, and these ideas that they're coming up with seem a little bit too little, too late to really save the idea. Yeah. That's it for Accession. Thank you very much, guys. We're both going to give that one a 3, but it's been a pretty strong year so far, and Rules of Engagement will be the next episode that comes along. So if you enjoyed the show, you can go to all the social media links. They'll be in the video description and the podcast blurb. You can go to Facebook, Twitter, Discord for discussion. Patreon.com/The Pensky File if you want to support the show there. A couple $2 a month to get extra stuff. We've got Night of the Living Dead coming up as our Halloween podcast. That'll be out Tuesday, the day before Halloween. And we did the live stream. I did that. We'll be doing that next month. You can check out the new perks. There's a whole bunch of podcasts over there. Support the show on patreon.com/The Pensky File. I think that's it. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
No. Poser's out in stores. Poser number 3 comes out on Halloween, if you want to try and find that somewhere. And listen to the Bat Ass podcast for Batman the Animated Series talk. I think we're going to be doing, I think Sean and I are going to be recording Mask of the Phantasm sometime in November. So if anybody has any questions or comments, shoot them to us and we'll try to read them off while we do it.
Yep. Catch up with Mask of the Phantasm, which is a movie I haven't seen in a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I've got those the Blu-ray remasters of the series coming, so I'm really looking forward to digging into that.
Is Phantasm a part of that?
Yeah, it's the entire series, Mask of the Phantasm and Batman Sub-Zero.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Captain tier patrons. They always get a shout out. Stephen Cobb, Jay Stanley, David K, Nick Sergey, Nathan Elliott, Michael Pond, Matthew Cutler, Will Yates, Matt Flores, Samuel Custer, Santos Gonzalez, Robert Cummins, Andrew Cherlog, Spinobi, Russ Graham, Eric Johnson, Decker Sebastiani, Neil Brennan, Bradley Killens, Mike Burnett, Matthew Ross, Ben Douglas, Kyle Barrett, Joint Mango, Tarek Latif. Thank you very much, guys. I guess we'll just end this with a quick little thing about Clay. What do you think of the announcement that there's going to be an animated comedy Star Trek series?
Sure, whatever.
Yeah,
it's by one of the Rick and Morty guys, right?
It is,
not like the main guys, but one of the writers.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm more interested to see what they do with that, honestly, than probably Discovery season 2. But I'm trying to be positive.
There is a mild concern. People brought it up in the Discord and on Twitter. I think there is a mild concern about how this fits into canon in some ways.
Listen, guys, if you're not already mildly concerned about what they're doing with canon based on Discovery, I don't think this one's going to help you any. So I feel like hard canon doesn't really exist anymore, unfortunately.
No, not in this. I think that I think that, and Tarek brought it up on Twitter to me, and I think it's a good point. Something I'd never really thought about before. Star Trek from 65, right, with TOS all the way through, I would say, Enterprise, had a very consistent universe to it, which is really kind of probably a strength of the series in some ways. Like, it was a very consistent, even when they were sort of breaking their inconsistent things, it was a universe that you felt like every show took place in the same spots. And writing a comedy that fits into that, and I'd agree with you, maybe that's dead already and there is no way to sort of bring that back, but the comedy will be very interesting how they choose to do it. Like, will it be a straight up satire parody of Star Trek, or are they going to use the Star Trek tone and actually make it funny, which is possible, I think, but it'll be difficult.
And is it specifically lower decks? So is it going to be on the Enterprise?
No, the concept is that
Enterprise?
Concept is that it's the least important ship in the Federation.
Oh, well, that's kind of fun. Yeah. So Voyager then.
It's a long way away. Can't interact with anybody. Yeah. I mean, that's how you do it, right? You can have a canon show like that by having the stakes be so low that it doesn't really matter to anybody.
Yeah.
And I'd be fine with that. But it'll be interesting. It's something coming down the line. We'll see. Anyway.
I think they should get Kelsey Grammer back and do an Enterprise C show.
Yeah. Or what the hell did they...
No, I'm sorry. He wasn't on the Enterprise C.
No, it was. I forget what the name of that ship was. It's the one that they crashed and caused an effect. But the woman is the captain of Enterprise C. I forget what her name is.
That's right. Yeah. Well, whatever ship he was on, do that show.
How dare you disrespect the canon of the series like that, Clay? I think that's it. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. We will be back with Rules of Engagement, which is Worf accidentally destroying a transport ship full of Klingon civilians, and he has to get yelled at for a while. So we'll be back with that episode. Clay, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And check out the Patreon, guys, if you want. The episode for Night of the Living Dead will be up Tuesday, so which is tomorrow on the day that this releases. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.